Hello, how you guys doing? James here. Well, I'm going to show you some very fascinating videos on another segment on some inventors about black people that you never even heard about. The only stories you heard about certain ones in the United States, the very common ones are Nat Turner, Rosa Parks. You probably heard of Harriet Tubman. You probably heard of Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, and so on and so forth. There's other black people, from politicians to athletes and other ones, other from inventors, but there's some more inventors you need to know about. But here's one of the stories about a young man.
Is immortalized in one of the most iconic works of Tudor art. Meet John Blank, a royal trumpeter whose presence in the Westminster tournament roll challenges everything you think you know about medieval Europe. John Blank served as a musician for King Henry VII and later for King Henry VIII in the early 1500s. His remarkable skill earned him a spot in the royal court, where he played a key role in grand ceremonies, including the 1511 Westminster tournament, celebrating the birth of a royal heir. Blanca's presence wasn't just symbolic, it was revolutionary. In the Westminster tournament roll, he is depicted wearing a striking turban, standing tall among his white counterparts, proving that black excellence has always been a part of European history. What's more, Blanc successfully petitioned King Henry VIII for higher wages, cementing his legacy as a trailblazer who broke barriers of race and class. Why isn't John Blanc's story celebrated worldwide? Drop a comment if you believe his legacy deserves to be remembered. Follow and share to honor this groundbreaking figure.
And that's one of many. Here's another guy.
How did a man born into slavery become the architect of education for black Texans? Meet Matthew Gaines, the Texas senator whose fight for justice built a legacy that still changes lives today. Born enslaved in 1840, Gaines endured unimaginable hardship, but after emancipation, he rose above it all. During the Reconstruction era, he was elected to the Texas Senate, where he became a powerful voice for equality and progress. His most enduring accomplishment? Ensuring black Texans had access to education by helping establish Prairie View A&M University, one of the first historically black colleges in the state. Gaines fought tirelessly to ensure the Morrill Act of 1862, which funded land-grant colleges, would benefit black students, an act of courage and vision that transformed education forever. Despite facing prison time on false charges meant to silence him, Gaines never backed down. How is it possible that his name isn't celebrated in every classroom? Drop a comment if you think Matthew Gaines deserves a chapter in every history book. Follow and share to honor.
That's another thing about black people. You didn't know that about black people, huh? I didn't even know it either. There's more. There's more. Watch this.
The unsung geniuses behind everyday innovations. Throughout history, black inventors have shaped the world with their brilliance and creativity, often overcoming immense barriers. Here's the story of 4 remarkable inventors and how their creations changed daily life. In the early 20th century, cars were becoming common, but shifting gears was tricky and dangerous. That's where R.B. Spikes came in. In 1932, Spikes patented the automatic gear shift, revolutionizing driving. His invention allowed cars to change gears smoothly without requiring drivers to master complicated mechanics. This made driving safer and more accessible. Spike's contribution paved the way for modern automatic transmissions, yet his name remains little known. Around the same time, handling coins was a hassle for vendors and customers. Enter James A. Bauer, who invented the coin changer in 1896. This clever device could sort and dispense coins of different denominations, speeding up transactions. Bauer's invention became a staple in vending machines and cash registers, simplifying commerce worldwide. In the kitchen, innovation was brewing. Maurice W. Lee introduced the pressure cooker, traditional cooking methods. His work set the stage for modern pressure cookers, transforming the way we prepare meals. Lastly, the postal box, a fixture of neighborhoods everywhere, owes its existence to P.B. Downing. Patented in 1891, Downing's design offered a secure and convenient way for people to send and receive mail. His invention became a cornerstone of the postal system, enhancing communication across communities. These inventors not only solved everyday problems, but also left lasting legacies. Their contributions remind us of the ingenuity and resilience that define Black history, inspiring us to celebrate and recognize the inventors who shaped our world.
But that's what they don't want you to know about black people. There's other things they don't want you to know about black people. Here's one.
Have you heard of the Black Medici who ruled Florence during the Renaissance? Alessandro de' Medici defied the odds to become the first Duke of Florence, reshaping European history forever. Born in 1510 to an African servant and Lorenzo de' Medici, Alessandro's heritage made him an outsider in a world dominated by European elites. Yet, in 1532, he rose to power, becoming the first black head of state in Renaissance Europe. Known as Il Moro, Alessandro was a skilled leader who balanced diplomacy and military strength to unify Florence and maintain its dominance. But Alessandro's reign wasn't without struggle. In a society rife with betrayal, racism, and political intrigue, he stood firm against those who sought to undermine him. Tragically, his cousin betrayed him, assassinating Alessandro in 1537. His death marked the end of a revolutionary chapter in Florentine history, but his legacy as a pioneer and leader endures. Why isn't Alessandro de' Medici celebrated as a trailblazer in European history? Drop a comment if
I didn't even know about him. Oh. Do you think that's something? There's more.
Why on earth would anybody call a house the House of the Blackheads? Well, it's interesting. If you go into the house, you will see many sculptures and paintings of Africans, and even next to the gate, one of the images on the front gate is a black man. Okay, that's wonderful, but what's the story? He was Mauricio, or Moritz, and he was a military leader about the 4th century or so, and this man was very venerated for his courage and for fighting on behalf of the church, and he was brave and all of these wonderful things. And then when he died, he was canonized and actually turned into a saint. So he was a warrior who became a saint. And there was a group of merchants, German merchants, who were coming back and forth here. They were part of the Hanseatic Union, which is a group of cities along great bodies of water in northern Europe. And they built this house, and they had a patron saint. And they adopted Maurizio as their patron saint. And so they call it the House of the Blackheads, in honor of this great and courageous man. Now, you can see it's ornate. Tremendous clock. It's just unbelievable. And there are sculptures up there. Most of them are of Greek mythology. There's a sculpture of St. George and the Dragon. There are inscriptions in Latin. There's all sorts of symbolism here. And in the 13th, 14th, 15th century, Chamber of Commerce of Riga. It's the place where they did business. But most of the traders, the German traders, they were merchants, and they were single. So one could say they did business by day and they did pleasure by night. So this was a party place and this was a business place.
The coat of arms of the Brotherhood of the Blackheads, it's an interesting coat of arms. It features 3 black men, whereas most coats of arms feature lions and bears and eagles, whereas this one is 3 black men, clearly from the centre of Africa. However, the exact term for blackheads is unknown. The patron saint, who I imagine is one of the 3 men on the coat of arms, or maybe it's the same person, was the black Egyptian Christian Saint Maurice. I think he's the person whose head appears on the shield. I think it's the same person at the top of the coat of arms, but I could be wrong. Saint Maurice is an interesting character, actually. He was born in Egypt, so he's Egyptian, in the city of Thebes, and he commanded a legion. As he progressed through life, he climbed up the Roman ranks, and he commanded a legion of 1,000 soldiers called the Thebians, or Thabians, the Thebes. I'm not sure I'm saying that correctly, but let's come back to that in a moment. Notice how Egyptians back in the day look more like Central Africans rather than the Egyptians we know today, because of course this was long before the Arab conquest of North Africa. So generally Egyptians back then were very black. Not all of them, but a lot of them, has to be said. It is even documented that many Egyptians were very Mediterranean looking, not in the same way that they look today. The Egyptians of today are so far unrelated to the Egyptians of 1800 to 2000 years ago. A lot's changed since then. But going back to Saint Maurice and his achievements, he commanded a legion of 1,000 soldiers. He was born 250 years AD. What makes him the saint that he is? He was a Christian before Christianity was really acceptable. 250 years after Christ, Christianity was still in its infancy, and the fact that this man commanded a legion of 1,000 soldiers, all Christians, and also in the Roman army, as Christianity was considered a threat to the Roman Empire, yet Saint Maurice and his legion moved easily within pagan society. That was until Maurice and the Theban Christian legion were sent by Maximian, the Roman Caesar of the time, who lived between 286 and 305 AD. He sent Maurice and his legion to what is now present-day Switzerland. He was ordered by Maximian to harass some local Christians. Maurice and his legion refused. Maximian ordered the punishment of the legion by executing every 10th soldier. This punishment was known as decimation. Decimation is a form of Roman military discipline in which the 10th man of every group is executed by members of his cohort. The discipline was used by senior commanders in the Roman army to punish units. Back in the day, the Roman army used this punishment on large units and groups guilty of capital offences, such as cowardness, mutiny and desertion. But in this case, Maximian used the punishment on Maurice's legion for their refusal to harass and possibly execute fellow Christians. The Theban Christians refused to attack their fellow Christians in what is known as the Great St. Bernard Pass, in a little place called Aganon, which is now called St. Maurice. And in St. Maurice, there is an abbey dedicated to this man, St. Maurice. St. Maurice's legion and himself were all martyrs to Christianity. It is said that the legion refused to harass the innocent Christians that inhabited the town. So the Emperor Caesar Maximian ordered Maurice and his men to be sacrificed to the Roman gods, hence a Christian martyr of the time, and a noble man.
Why on earth would anybody call a house the house of the black head?
Nothing about black people you didn't know about, huh? You know, just amazing people. But it's weird how you don't, some black people they're taught They're not taught how great they are. You think yourself as the N-word. Hood. Some of us do.
Mally Pearson was born Mally Eddy in 1904 in Alabama to Marzine and Camilla Eddy. Her parents were likely the children of formerly enslaved black people. In 1920, when she was 16 years old, she married James Pearson. Together, they had 5 children. In April of 1953, Mally and James lived in Houser, Alabama in Choctaw County. Mally was 50 years old. She was a homemaker and a midwife. Someone said that Mally stole a bale of cotton from a local business. Now, I found this allegation interesting because a 1940 census record showed that Mally and her husband James owned their own farm. They weren't sharecroppers. They farmed their own land. So she would have had no reason to steal cotton because her family likely grew it. On April 3rd, 1953, around 2 p.m., Sheriff Kirvin Covington, Deputy Otis Glenn Wainwright, and Deputy Harry Leon Clark drove to find Mally. When they found Mally, she was with her husband James. They forced Mally to get into their vehicle. Just like during slavery times, James was powerless to do anything. I can't even begin to imagine what he must have felt at that moment. These weren't just white men who came for his wife. They were white law enforcement. And like so many black people had done before him, he had to consider many things at that moment. He had to think not only about his wife's life, but also about his life and their children. If he acted the way he wanted to, would it cost him and Mally their lives right there? And what would happen to their children? There was no one to help him or Mally, because those that were supposed to help them were the ones carrying out this injustice. Sheriff Covington and his 2 deputies drove Mally out of town to a field between Hounslow and Butler. They wanted to make sure that no one was around for what they were about to do to her. Mally must have been terrified during this ride. This was a ride that many black people took, but not many made it back from. Once at the field, they told Mally to get out. Mally initially said no because she was scared. That's when one of the men hit her in the head with a piece of iron and forced her to get out of the vehicle. After this, the situation went from bad to horrific. The 3 white men then forced Mally to lie on the ground on her stomach. Sheriff Covington then went to cut a branch from a tree. As he was going to get the branch, one of his deputies pulled off his belt and began to beat Mally. He beat her on her buttocks and on her thighs. He hit her with all of his might and all of his strength. The other deputy then beat Mally with a club. That's when Sheriff Covington returned with the tree branch. He joined his deputies and he too beat Mally. These men beat and treated her like she wasn't even human, like she wasn't alive. Mally lay on the ground as the men beat her to near death. As they were beating her, Sheriff Covington squatted down in front of Mally and told her to tell them where she hid the cotton. Mally screamed out in pain and said that she did not steal anything and didn't know what they were talking about. Sheriff Covington told Mally that if she continued to scream, he would take that branch and ram it down her throat and cram dirt in her mouth until she told them what they wanted to know. But this was not the end of this Jim Crow horror show. The 3 white men then pulled up Mally's dress and began to beat her more. They kept beating her as they tried to get her to confess to something that she did not do. The beating went on for an hour. Finally, after Mally would not confess, they stopped the beating and released her. But they told Mally that if she mentions a single word about what happened to her to anyone, they would take her life. The beating that Covington and Wainwright and Clark subjected Mally to was so severe that she had to spend 4 days in a hospital in Meridian, Mississippi. Dr. Columbus Jackson examined Mally. He said that Mally was so weak and in so much pain from the beating that she couldn't stand and could only kneel. Mally had severe bruising and marks on her flesh that indicated that at least 3 objects had been used to beat her. Mally stayed quiet about what happened to her. Like many black victims of Jim Crow brutality, Mally knew that there was no one to run to, no one to tell, no one to come to the rescue. So, like thousands before her, she kept her mouth shut, hoping that what happened to her before would not happen again. These men had almost taken her life, and they did not care that they had been seen in broad daylight kidnapping Mally off the street. Mally had to think not only about what happened to herself if they came back, but what would happen to her husband James or their children. Would they lynch James? Would they harm their kids? This is what Jim Crow did to black people. But somehow a local white pastor got word of what happened to Mally, and he decided to report this incident to the FBI. On September 29, 1953, the federal grand jury indicted Sheriff Covington, Deputy Wainwright, and Deputy Clark, and charged them with violating Mally Pearson's civil rights. If convicted, they face 10 years of prison and a $10,000 fine. After being indicted by the grand jury, Sheriff Covington, Deputy Wainwright, and Deputy Clark surrendered to federal authorities. They were arraigned on October 14, 1953, where they each pleaded not guilty to the charges and were released on $1,500 bond. After court, when asked by a reporter about the case, Sheriff Covington said that he didn't know anything about Malley's allegations other than what he read in the indictment. He pretended as if he was clueless about what was going on and why he was being federally prosecuted. At the trial, Malley testified. She told the jury how the men beat her, how they took turns brutalizing her, how the beating went on for an hour. She talked about how she was humiliated and threatened. But it wasn't just her testimony against the sheriff and the two deputies. The two white doctors who treated her at the hospital, Dr. Columbus Jackson and Dr. J.P. Tatum, they both testified that they personally observed the injuries that Malley sustained as a result of the severe beating she received. The FBI agent who investigated and spoke to Malley also testified. He told the jury that Malley was confident in her identification of these three white men, and she did not hesitate when asked who harmed her. After a day and a half of witness testimony, the jury began deliberations. The overwhelming evidence did not matter. The jury came back and found Sheriff Covington, Deputy Wainwright, and Deputy Clark not guilty of all charges. In a letter to the U.S. Justice Department, U.S. Attorney Fountain later wrote that everyone believed that the men were guilty, and the judge thought that there might be a conviction. That was until they heard rumors that the jury was not comfortable with punishing a white man for beating a black woman. Sheriff Covington died in November of 1998 at age 76. Deputy Otis Glenn Wainwright died in 1980 at age 57. Harry Leon Clark went on to run for sheriff himself in 1958. He won that election. The injustice he inflicted on Malley Pearson and so many other black people was not an impediment to his success in life. It might have helped to fuel it. He remained sheriff until 1975. He died in 1985 at age 67. Malley Pearson later moved to Ohio. She died in May of 1990 at age 86. Her husband James died in 1981. For 37 years, Malley Pearson lived every day with the pain, trauma, shame, and humiliation that those three white men caused her. This is not something that you just get over or you forget about as time goes on. You think about this every day. That is what Jim Crow and racism did to black people. It robbed thousands of black people of their lives, and it has robbed millions more like Malley Pearson of their dignity and their peace. That is why it is so important that we tell these stories. I want to know your thoughts on this video. Had you ever heard of
all of the burning and bombing that was done to us and the houses, nobody never said too much about that, and nothing was done. But let something be burned, by a black man, and then, my God, you see, the flag is drenched with our blood, because you see, so many of our ancestors was killed because we have never accepted slavery. We had to live on it, but we've never wanted it. So we know that this flag is drenched with our blood. So what the young people are saying now, give us a chance to be young men, respected as a man, as we know this country was built on the black backs of black people across this country. And if we don't have it, you ain't gonna have it either, because we gonna tear it up. That's what they saying. And people ought to understand that. I don't see why they don't understand it. They know what they've done to us. All across this country, they know what they've done to us.
We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the fuck do I give a shit about burning the fucking Football Hall of Fame, about burning a fucking Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give a fuck. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood, and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so fuck your target. Fuck your Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this bitch to the ground. And it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
That's very true. I can't argue about that. And they wonder why, black people are the way they are. But it gets really interesting.
So I just saw a white lady, a mega mom, complain to the school board why her white daughter can't call the black kids the N-word. So you trying to go there now, huh? Go ahead, try it. Go on people's faces and call them the N-word and see who gets slapped and knocked out. Y'all won the election, but y'all ain't never finna start calling us the N-word. But this white lady is in front of the school board. She got the nerve to complain about her white daughter is not allowed to call the black kids the N-word. I don't know what got it to y'all white people, but that shit ain't gonna never happen. There's gonna be a lot of motherfuckers in a coma if you think that's gonna work. So please, just enjoy y'all fucking victory and live these last 4 years in joy. But the disrespect for us, it will not continue. And y'all ain't never finna call us the N-word, especially not in our face. So try it if you want to. Try it if you fucking want to. So I just saw a white lady, a mega mom.
Pretty intense, huh?
Black people, when you're talking on this app and you're in other black spaces online, please be careful with interacting with white people, playing to be black people behind a page. Now, I've seen it before and I didn't say anything about it because I really found it extremely weird, but then I seen it post-election and it really just didn't sit right in my spirit. And we all know how we talk. We all know how we talk. They don't understand how we talk because they have an image of how we talk in their head. So they always end up saying some weird shit. When you're online and you see one of these pro-African pages and they're saying craziness, understand that may not even be a black person at all. It is people that simply want to be in black spaces and don't know how to get into them. So they will try to portray themselves as a black person simply to be in our space. Do what you want with that information. Black people, when you're talking on this app and you're other black
Wow, that's powerful, ain't it? But last least, but just popped up this one. You ever heard of Timothy Wise? Listen to what he got to say.
The history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, you know, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote-unquote white folks who are poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people, right? So ultimately, the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness, and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. Fast forward to the Civil War era, and you have, I'm from the South, right? My people, the elite in my part of the country, right, actually announced that the reason they wanted to break away from the Union and possibly go to war with their brothers and sisters to the North was in order to maintain slavery and white supremacy. They said that at the time. We lie about it now, and we say it had nothing to do with that. But of course, at the time, they didn't have any shame about it, so they just said it openly. Right? The vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, said that the cornerstone of the new government was the great truth that the Negro was not the equal of the white man. So that's the reason the Confederacy was formed and existed. But here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war. Right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them, whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right? Rich folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that shit because he's sitting in the White House right now, right? Well, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please, right? So that's been a long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But that's a hard thing. That's like a hard sell, right? Like, how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta go fight because we gotta maintain our way of life, because if these people get free, they're gonna take your jobs. No, fool, they already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I got to charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job, right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system. That would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point. So they didn't want to integrate their unions. And they would say things like, well, we can't have black people and Mexicans and Chinese folks in our unions because if we do that, it's going to reduce the professionalism of our craft. We have to maintain the integrity of our profession. No, fool, you need more people in the damn union is what you need. And if you don't let those folks in, Guess what happens when you go out on strike? Who is the boss going to use to replace you? They're gonna replace you with the very same black and brown folks that you didn't want to work next to, right? And so at the end of the, and then you're gonna blame them for taking your job rather than the white rich dude for giving it to them, right? Divide and conquer, telling not rich white folks that their enemies are black and brown. And now we fast forward to the president. We got the president of the United States becoming president on the basis of that same rhetoric, telling not rich white folks that the reason they don't have a job is because Mexicans took a whole history of America, is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United.
There's no other place open and I need to eat. I won't stay, I just need a hot coffee and a hamburger and I'll take it to go. Please.
Well, the coffee will be hot, but the hamburger's gonna be cold. And you gotta pay first.
How much?
60 cents. You know, I couldn't lose my job. They could shut this diner down.
Keep change. I'll be gone as soon as the food's ready. Don't have a bathroom?
There's one for the help out back.
That was old Curtis. He laid in the ditch with pants off. That ain't the first time we found him like that.
Bobby, Mayor, what are you guys doing this late? You know, we're about to close.
Keeping the town safe. 2 coffees. Listen, you gotta get your pants on. You cannot.
As a disabled business owner, my time is mostly spent writing emails and before.
On. You cannot.
Hello brothers and sisters, I just hope that you find wherever you are today. Now most of us, we were taught about slavery, the implication of slavery, and of course even the story of slavery and the history of slavery. There were some parts that were hidden from us, but now there is this part of black history which was excluded. I don't know if I'll call it the really black history or not black history, but this is what happened. The history behind sundown towns. Most of us, we were never taught this. Actually, it dawned to me the year 2014, today, not today, but the year 2014. Actually, I came to know about this like 3 months ago when we had, the climatic conditions, things, the calamities that were happening in sundown towns. That's when I heard the name sundown town for the first time. And later on, after all those things happened, today marked the day that I was interested in really getting to know the history of these places. How did really black people were treated? Because it was said that especially black people were not allowed in white only areas when the sun sets. Things were written like you're not allowed here. Don't let the sun get you here, and a number of things that were said to exclude black people from having this. And these were racially segregated communities in the United States that systemically excluded non-white residents, particularly African Americans, black Americans, through both formal and informal methods. These towns emerged in large numbers during the late 19th century, coinciding with the collapse of during the late 19th century, coinciding with the collapse of the Reconstruction and the rise of Jim Crow laws in the South. However, the sundown towns were not confined to the South. They were a widespread phenomenon in the Midwest, West, and North. The term sundown town refers to the unwritten, yet brutally enforced rule that black individuals were required to leave the town before sunset or face severe consequences, including violence and death. These rules were often communicated through signs at the town's borders, warning into uncertain times, don't let the sun set on you here. And a number of black people who had already settled in these places, they were forced to leave, regardless whether they owned land. And I heard a lot of black people left their lands out of these places. And I get to understand the value of land even today. And some of them were forced to leave. this land so you can understand how devastating this was. I want us to hear black people's opinion in regards to what really the sound downtown really is. People are sharing their experience, people are sharing their personal anecdotes, and I think that's the most important thing. Let's get into the video. I'll be back and we'll say, 1, 2, 3, and learn from our brothers and sisters who have had history or maybe have experienced it one-on-one. Let's dive right into it.
A black man would open his front door in the morning and he would see a bundle of sticks tied with string just laying on his front doorstep. And that was all it took. Because that was saying, next time it'll be dynamite. There were 48 families who were documented landowners in Forsyth County at that time, black documented landowners at that time.
In a matter of days, 1,100 black people were displaced, eclipsing any wealth and progress they'd made during Reconstruction.
They had to leave Forsyth County, regardless of what you had, what you owned, you had to leave.
Elam Osby is a descendant of one of those families. Her grandfather owned somewhere between 60 and 80 acres of land in Forsyth.
I have a home here that's on an acre of land almost, and you're really proud of that, and to think that my grandfather had 80-something acres, it's staggering. It hurts, it's sad, and I can't imagine what my grandfather must have been feeling. Land was more important than money in the bank, and I'm sure that he was very proud of himself as a Negro man, to have property like that.
Forsyth remained an all-white county for over 70 years, and that pattern of violence against black people continued.
Every decade I looked into, there was another episode of violence. There was another outbreak of really shocking bigotry. Miguel Marcelli was an Atlanta firefighter who came to Lake Lanier in 1980, and he and his girlfriend were both of them black, were at a company picnic on Lake Lanier, and Miguel Marcelli got shot in the head.
A child custody battle with a narcissist is literally like living a hell on earth. I mean,
can't believe that something like this would happen.
Tonight, questions around what happened at Gettysburg College. Officials now investigating what may have been a racially motivated incident. Good evening, I'm Valerie Pritchett.
I'm Alicia Richards, so glad you're with us. Gettysburg College tells us the student who allegedly scratched a racial slur into another student is no longer enrolled at the college. Ireland Viscount is here with our update tonight. Ireland.
Valerie, Alicia, what happened at Gettysburg College has sent shockwaves to the community, especially the students who came up to us wanting to share how they are feeling following this incident.
I'm beyond angry. I am mortified. I am furious, horrified, confused, and most of all, disappointed at what's happened.
It was just shocked. We haven't really had any sort of events like that happen. And it's just like a shocking thing that just came out of complete nowhere.
The family of the victim sent a statement to the Gettysburgian, the Gettysburg student newspaper, saying on the evening of Friday, September 6th, our son became the victim of a hate crime.
From what I know, the N-word was carved, etched with a box cutter into the bare skin of a colored member of the swim team. One of the only colored members, by someone who they thought was a friend, someone who they could trust.
The family statement confirms this and says it was etched across his chest. Last week, the college said plastic or ceramic tool was used to scratch the slur into the student's body.
I can't fathom as to why someone would go to that length, as to why a monster like this, and there's no more appropriate term to use, would do this to someone else. A person, a human being.
Rosario says he is from Kensington, Philadelphia.
AKA what a lot of people call Zombie Town because of the drug epidemic going on at the moment. But now I can say I probably felt more safe there than here. With what just happened.
The college sharing a statement from them and the family. It says in part, a heinous act can serve as a transformative moment for Gettysburg College to live up to its ideals of diversity, inclusion, and justice. We pray that together we can arouse a collective conscience, promoting healing and help bring about justice for our son and the rest of the Gettysburg College community. A criminal complaint has not been filed with the Gettysburg Police. The department says the victim has decided to let the college handle the matter.
In the family statement to the Gettysburgian, they say they filed a complaint with the NAACP Harrisburg chapter and the NAACP Pennsylvania Conference, adding they also sent a similar complaint to the Pennsylvania Commission on Human Relations. Alicia.
Just terrible.
Welcome back to Breakdown Friday, Joseph Ward.
I'm gonna go ahead stop this video right here. You know, all I gotta say is this: some things never end. People say, why don't we move on? How can you move on when you're not the person being a victim of something, simply that you can't help what God put on your body? How can you move on? How is it that you can forget about this when it's the history? When the people who have been victimized have not been brought up about race? When the people have been victimized over centuries after centuries, showing you that they're not part of the problem. They want to be at peace. They want to live their life. What kind of an individual carries this from generation to generation that teach their children this stuff? And these are young people coming from generation after generation, and then you have a segment of people who just think, oh, they will probably just take it nonchalant of another that happened to another human being, just like they did back in what happened in 1980s, the 1970s, the 1960s, 1950s. It's the same spirit that goes all the way back. But yet, we don't want to talk about this. I can honestly say, as a black man in America, if I was ever get reparations, let's say God bless me with it, I couldn't be here. That's one of the reasons why. Because even if you get the land, you will never be at peace. They will always have that spirit in them, trying to anger, jealousy, hatred, envious of something you got. Why they suffer. And then I was looking at something, and it is wrong to feel that way. And they wonder why some of us don't. It's sad to even see some of us that's among them that's in these mountain towns that suffer. They lost their land, lost everything, lost their life. You see how but there's been so much wickedness, uncovered wickedness, continually uncovered. There's been so much blood spilled in the land, and still yet it has not yet to been answered. And then when people bring this up, they like, why can you say something like that? Because America has a history, and she will not repent. She truly will not repent and accept. There's a small segment of people do, but there's people, it's embedded. Racism is embedded and is in the century. Could you imagine being a part of people who never did anything wrong, and you look at another man, another woman who have a darker complected skin, and instantly you have the mind that you want to destroy them for no reason. I don't like this for no reason. I'm better than for no reason. Can I tell you something? And I was thinking this is funny. If there were aliens, I'm just going to entertain this fact. That it took every black person out, a good portion of out of the United States, take the best and the brightest, and they dumped us into a land where it was prosperity, milk and honey. We would survive and live in peace forever, and we would get generation of that, envies and jealousy out of our spirit. And I'm just entertaining this. I bet you there'd be a segment of white people would ask Elon Musk to figure out where did those aliens take those black folks go, and how can we get there? And the ones would be curious. It'd be the weird ones that want to come over and torment us again. It's the truth. They try like, oh, we just want to see where they at. Like, no, and they say, no, you can't go in there. Why? Because it's reserved for them. I'm just saying it as a fact. But it's like, could you imagine? What would it be like if something like that would have happened? I mean, just what would happen to the ones that had the minds to create things and build things? What would have happened if they wouldn't have stole all the patents and inventions and stuff and never gave credit to them? What would have happened? And that they put a supremacy mindset all over the planet based on pigment of skin. What would have happened? And that's basically what it is. That there are people that carry that spirit. Well, it really would. They would literally have, and Elon Musk would try to find a rocket to try to find where we at. I'm talking about, it was some aliens. It was a movie made about that one time, back in the 80s. Somebody probably remember that movie where these spaceships came down and grabbed all the black folks off the space. It was something, I don't know if that would ever happen, but white people are about, they, something like, who give a shit? At least it'd be us. But I'm just curious. Well, you can have everything that you've been wanting. That's not physically, you don't have to feel threatened by, or what's the problem? They're off the planet. They're on the other side of the planet somewhere. They would. And if we was on this other side of the planet, minding our own business, and just living life and working, being productive, or however we would survive in peace, and it was no strife and war, and God would heal us from all the anxiety of generational curses that's been in some of us in our bloodline. Man, what would that be? Man, that would be something, would it? But some of these people they'd be the main one, probably be act like they're not prejudiced, but it'd be the ones of indirect prejudice ones. They'll try to find us. See, the ones that direct, they won't care. Like, leave them folks alone. Good, we got them out of here. Now we can repopulate the earth with us. And we could put the color shade back up again, because that's what it seems like it's been about. That, and then move down to class and social status. That's what it comes down to. But it's really pathetic. People are having that kind of bias, and you see how. But in the beginning, I like about this video, you see how great we are. We built things. They didn't tell you about certain things. But the second half of the video was just to make you think that that's what you're good for. Just because of someone centuries ago, they always had it in for you. So some of them Hebrew brothers and sisters been telling you about the word, they were right. Some of the videos they've been showing you throughout history, they were right. There you have it. So it's like, well, but it I think comes back to the Jacob and Esau. Like, Esau is so, it's that Esau spirit in some people that can't stand black people. Like, you just like going against, disintegrate them. It's crazy, man. And they can get away from it, then they want to know where you at. It's like, dang, stay where you at. But it's like, okay, and I'm telling you, man, They would. I'm serious. They'd be. We took all. It would be. We went on the basketball team, the football team, the baseball team, track team, boxing, everything. We just give us $1 billion, put on the other side of the planet. These folks will go on the other side of the planet, trying to figure out where we at. I mean, it's like, okay, now you smart enough. You can invent the stuff now. Reinvent your society. You're the superior ones. I mean, by status and the racial construct of skin tone and everything. I mean, these two the people who subconsciously think like that. I know all people like that don't think like that. All white people don't think like that. But the ones that subconsciously do, you know. And that's why they did what they did. They did from centuries after centuries. Some of them did. Some probably don't even know that this even happened. And now they give a better respect to who we are. We are great black people. Too bad we catching heck in this life, but it's going to be better than life. Just remember that. Even though they try to make you invisible, you will always be visible in the eyes of God. Even though they don't want to put you on television and put you in the movies, they won't tell you about your story in the magazine until they select you. But you're the first selected by the Most High God. Remember that. Take care, be blessed. See you on the next video.